Part 21. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 201. Greet finally began to study those meditation methods. Before that, Master Carlyle took away 2 scrolls and a crystal with a dark face. As for the use of the magic crystal, before he left, he told Gretel, without him, just use your mental power to penetrate into the crystal and receive the information. As for whether it can handle such a large flow of information and how much it can absorb, that depends on fate. Anyway, it doesn't stop you from trying it a few times. Greet. I always feel that my cerebral blood vessels will burst in any minute. I should prepare some anti-hypertensive medicine, or keep a bottle of mannitol handy. He silently put down the crystal in his hand and looked at the scroll first. It is indeed a meditation rule provided by Thunderhorn to new magicians. The text is concise and clear, and it is written in common magic words. After studying for more than half a year, Greet has mastered this language and can read it without any pressure. It's just that, this meditation method called Star Meditation Method focuses on using one's own mental power to attract the stars in the sky, find the star of one's destiny, and use starlight to assist one's cultivation. It is said that this meditation method has a lot to do with luck. If you are lucky and the star that resonates with you is strong enough, you can create a powerful magician. Gretel thought about how many light years away the nearest star was from here, and felt that his mental power was not that high, so he silently put the scroll back. The meditation method on the inside of the golden fur was written in another ancient magic language that Gretel did not recognize. Greet spent a long time flipping through books and consulting Master Carlyle before he figured out the principle of this meditation method. That fur was taken from a powerful ancient beast. After thousands of years, it is still immortal. The magician needs to feel the breath of the fur, synchronize his mental power with it, and finally, let the mental power transform into a strange beast, gaining its power of swallowing thunder and lightning and traveling in the void. Gretel, isn't it true that the longer you live, the more you will go back? I am a human being, why should I get closer to the beast? Moreover, by using a piece of fur to simulate an ancient beast, it is definitely not a blind man touching an elephant. Whichever piece you touch will be the one. If there is genetic engineering, it would be more reliable to first clone a living creature with fur, and then synchronize the mental power with the living alien beast. With no choice but to touch the crystal, Gretel lay back on the bed. He couldn't get mannitol now, and even if he could get it, he wouldn't dare give it to himself. That thing is for intravenous injection. We can't get enough pure, sterile water, and we can't get the equipment that can control the infusion speed. If we rashly inject it into our own veins, we're looking for death. Of course, if the mental shock is too great and the blood vessels in the brain are about to burst, another way of thinking is to lower the blood pressure. He couldn't get Western medicines such as Betalic and Nifedipine. Chinese medicines, Panax nodo ginseng, cassia seed, Gastrodia elata, Euchemia ulmoides. Goodbye. The area was wrong, there were no such medicinal materials, and even if they were, he wouldn't recognize them in front of him. With no choice, Greet could only initiate the first plan for treating cerebral hemorrhage in advance, absolutely lying still. Oh, by the way, there is also partial cooling of the head. Greet brought a glass of water over and threw a freezing ray into it to ensure that the water could be poured out at any time when it was frozen. He lay back on the pillow, held the magic crystal and placed it between his eyebrows. Breathe evenly, close your eyes, and slowly tap into your spiritual power. Outside the guest room, Master Carlyle and the legendary mage Descartes were observing Gretel's every move with their mental power across the wall, looking at each other in confusion. Why is he doing all this? Have no idea. Gretel has started to receive information. A torrent of information rushed into his mind. Fortunately, it was still within the range he could receive. It felt like a PPT unfolding. Graphics, Text, graphics that rotate and split, explanatory text that appears following the graphics. No headshots, no brain hemorrhages, no pounding in my temples, thank God. The meditation method in this magic crystal is more complicated than the previous ones. It discusses the core of meditation, the outer shell of the meditation environment, and the way to release spiritual power. In this rule, the most written paragraph teaches magicians how to build a shell. On the outer edge of the meditation environment, use mental power to build a spiral shell that extends outward in circles, with the opening getting wider and wider. It absorbs a large amount of external energy from the bell mouth, filtering it ring by ring, layer by layer. The energy that is unnecessary and conflicts with its own nature is discharged from the holes in the shell. The necessary part is filtered layer by layer and incorporated into the core of meditation to strengthen itself. The more turns the shell has and the larger the opening, the higher the efficiency of absorbing energy, and these layers of shell also form a strong protection for the magician's own spiritual core. The vortex-shaped shell can even make the absorbed external energy have the strongest activity. It seems quite reasonable. As for how to construct the outer shell, the information flow conveyed by the magic crystal drew the shape very enthusiastically, and said that just follow the drawing. What? Really can't remember? Magic crystal also gives an alternative: buy a conch that you like, and try to build it like it. By the way, remember that the outer shell can be rougher, but the inner wall must be smooth and even, just like the inner wall of a conch, how it looks when touched with your fingers. Okay, the previous meditation method was still a magical vertebrate, but now it has dropped all the way to a mollusk. Is this considered living a better life? Greet reflected silently for a moment, then sat up and looked around. What surprised him was that there were actually several conchs in different sizes and shapes in the display cabinet in the guest room. There are horn-shaped ones, spike-shaped ones, vase-shaped ones, and standard conical ones. Each one is complete, smooth, and clean, obviously carefully selected. Greet was silently moved. Archmage Carlyle really took great pains. Even though he was so picky, he still prepared tools for him to advance his meditation. But, forgive him for being too picky, every conch here is beautiful, but none of them meet the standard of perfection in his mind. The kind he wanted, the kind he wanted. Greet unconsciously drew circles on the glass of the cabinet door with her fingers. Round and round, round and round, spinning bigger and bigger. He was suddenly stunned. Isn't this a spiral? At most, it is a conical spiral, and at most, it is a conical tube. I can use functions to describe it. Use mathematics to guide this curve, use mathematics to build this model, and the meditation shell you create is the most reliable. Gretel almost rolled over and threw himself back to the table. I laid out the paper, picked up the pen, and then, I was stunned. What is the function of a conic spiral? How should the parameters be set? It's over, forget it. He closed his eyes and concentrated. Thanks to the memory given by time travel, I can remember each page of advanced medical mathematics vividly. I did finish the studies back then, and I did get high marks in the exam. However, after not using them for so many years, some of the formulas listed in the book seemed to be familiar to me, and some looked like, well, I was already face blind. What I haven't said yet, let's review it. Gretchen rang the bell rope. Facing the invisible servant who appeared silently, he showed an embarrassed and somewhat tragic smile. Bring me a knife of paper, and 2 bottles of ink. As for pens, bring me 10 pens first. Thanks to @HeyGayHey for the 100 starting coins. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, please review books. Is there anyone who hasn't voted for the minimum monthly vote today? Remember to give it to me. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 202. Chapter 202 Upgrade. Upgrade. No more promotion? First day. Has Gretel started meditating? No, I'm still writing and doing calculations. The next day. Have you started meditating? No, he is still writing. The third day. Did you meditate? No, he asked for another knife of paper. Archmage Carlyle asked no more questions. Changing the meditation method is a very serious and important matter. Many magicians will try their best to adjust their mood and prepare themselves before taking this step. There are those who bathe and change clothes and sleep for 3 days and 3 nights, there are those who relax while fishing in the sea breeze, there are those who go to indescribable places that are indescribable. Archmage Carlyle asked his mentor for a piece of magic equipment and traveled hundreds of miles to kill the enemy who bullied his sister. Revenge when there is a grudge, and revenge when there is a grudge. In comparison, locking yourself in a room to write and do calculations, using up $2 of paper in 3 days, is nothing more than normal. Archmage Carlyle is not worried about Gretel being too distracted from his duties. He is only worried that Gretel is too tight and unable to find his condition. Gretel didn't even tear up the paper. He laid out every piece of paper neatly and made a pile. Gretel didn't feel too nervous. He sat upright at the table, writing and dictating, or rather copying the contents of advanced medical mathematics. Discussions, formulas, diagrams, exercises. Copying and copying, I absorbed the lectures I listened to in college, the questions I answered, and my insights while studying, bit by bit. Unknowingly, Greed had returned to the state he was in when he had just finished the course in the first semester of his freshman year. It was also the pinnacle of his mathematics level in his previous life. With this peak state, Gretel worked non-stop towards the newly acquired meditation method. It only took him 1 day to calculate the curve of the meditation shell, and another day to calculate the positions of the filter and the nozzle hole. Then, finally having enough to eat and drink, he applied for retreat. Meditation room. The Mage Tower has a dedicated meditation room, which provides magicians with a safe, non-disturbing meditation environment with selectable energy types and high energy concentration, which is more suitable for magicians to upgrade. The Junior Meditation Room is on the 3rd floor, with 100 contribution points per day, and is suitable for level 1-4 magicians. The Intermediate Meditation Room is on the 7th floor, with 1000 contribution points per day, and is suitable for level 5-9 magicians. The low-level mage who was responsible for doing odd jobs in the Mage Tower and handling chores for the bosses paused and looked at Gretel meaningfully. The implication is that you shouldn't need to use the Advanced Meditation Room, right? Gretel really doesn't need it. In fact, he was counting his fingers in his mind, trying to calculate how many contribution points he had. The X-ray article, 3 contribution points, the bat pathogenicity article, 30, the B ultrasound article, 3. The recently published papers, the one on the principle of sterility and the 2 on microscopy, are all 1 contribution point. The one on dysentery is 50 points, plus the subsidy from the Magic Council after registration, 1 per month for a first-level magician contribution points, 5 points per month for a first-level arcanist. No matter how you calculate it, it's not even close to 100 points. Sad. Hey, can the meditation room be rented by the hour? The low-level magician who led the way looked at him dumbfounded. By the hour? Rent a meditation room by the hour? Except for the real rich, who rent a meditation room just to break through barriers, who wants to be interrupted in the middle of meditation. Brother, are you really sure you want to rent by the hour? Gretel knew from the look on his face that it would definitely not work. He hesitated for a moment, and between just retreat in the guest room and swipe his face and let Archmage Carlyle make the decision and waive the bill, he decidedly chose the latter. Anyway, now he is under the control of Thunderhorn. He is willing to pay for all the meditation methods, but he will not even be willing to pay for the meditation room. Well, if you really don't want to, the worst possible thing is to ask him to borrow money first. The phlogiston paper was approved, and 100 contribution points were not enough. If it still doesn't work, write a few more papers, apply for research project approval, and then advance the project funds to upgrade. Greed made a list of 1, 2, or 3 options in his mind and ran away. Archmage Carlyle patiently listened to his appeal. He didn't say he was willing to pay the bill or borrow money. Instead, he proposed a new plan. Actually, I think you can see how much contribution you have made. Do you still need to watch it? However, Archmage Carlyle waved his hand, and the disciple next to him, also a 5th-level magician, had already brought a magic circle. Gretel quickly nodded to him to thank him, took off his badge, and placed it on the magic circle with doubts. In the center of the badge, on the dark background, there are still 2 bronze stars unchanged. However, at the edge of the badge, 1 white ring, 2 white rings, 3 white rings slowly appeared. 4 rings. Ah, the 4th ring, you are 1 less than the 5th ring. But the 4th ring is also very high. The Magic Council's assessment of arcane level is basically related to the magician's research ability and ability to master arcane knowledge. Generally speaking, being a 4th-level arcanist means being able to master 4th-level magic without any hindrance. In other words, he will not encounter obstacles until he reaches level 7 or even level 8 magician. Why did you rush to the 4th ring road all of a sudden? How many rewards did you calculate for me for all the stuff I submitted before? Gretel was stunned. In his shocked eyes, a second row of numbers lit up on the magic circle. 1592. 1592 contribution points. Use it to rent a junior meditation room for half a month at a time, without any pressure. Seeing the surprised look on Gretel's face, Carlyle leaned back, crossed his fingers, and silently admired his expression. It's been half a month, it's been half a month. Did you just find out? After other magicians submitted their papers, they wished they could live in the magic review department and swipe their magic badges every hour or even every minute. Gretel was lucky, she stayed in his guest room for half a month. Meals are brought to you, dirty clothes are taken away, showers are provided, and the guest room has its own bathroom. He could really stay at home. If the preparations hadn't been completed, he probably wouldn't have even poked his nose out of the door. Archmage Carlyle has gone all the way to this day. Every archmage above level 10 that he has met has the perseverance to forget about food and sleep when necessary. But Gretel is only at level 2, so he can have such concentration, especially since Gretel has not been practicing magic or doing magic experiments from the beginning to the end. He is just burying his head at the table, writing and doing calculations. Now that he had money, Gretel gave up his thoughts and left. He swiped his magic badge and entered the meditation room. As soon as he sat down, the crystal pillars on the wall lit up. Dear Master, hello. Welcome to the meditation room. It is recommended to measure your mental strength first so that you can track the progress of your meditation and understand your progress. Huh? Have you measured your mental strength? Is it free? Dear Master, the rental of the meditation room includes the cost of the mental power test, please feel free to use it. The 100 contribution points spent on this day are quite worthwhile. At the very least, Greed had never seen this kind of measurement function anywhere else. However, Gretel did not immediately activate this function, but asked cautiously. Can others see the strength of my mental power? The meditation room is managed by the Tower Spirit. Except for the legendary Mage of Thunderhorn, no one else has the authority to access it. The legendary mage wants to kill him with just one finger, without leaking his data. Gretel was relieved. He followed the voice in the crystal pillar, concentrated his energy, and fought hard to attack it. The surface of the crystal fluctuated, changing from colorless and transparent to light red, from light crimson to pink, then to fiery red, and after a moment's pause, it turned to cinnabar again. Finally, a number was fixed in the center of the crystal. 65. No explanation, no explanation, no comparison. Greet shrugged, wrote down the number, and meditated. He had been fully prepared before. At this time, he was just following the calculated function, focusing on concentrating his mental power to build a protective shell on the outer edge of the meditation environment. The origin of the coordinates, the x-axis, the y-axis, the z-axis, the lines circle and stretch to build the pipeline, the bulges on the outer edge of the pipeline, the filters inside the pipeline, the holes that spew out impurities. The environment in the meditation room is rich and peaceful. I didn't feel it when I came in. After starting to meditate, Greet sighed, these 100 contribution points are really not in vain. To be rich, it means that the concentration of elements in the room is indeed higher than the outside environment. When the mental energy is lacking, it can be supplemented from the outside world at any time. To be quiet, it means that the elements in the room are not restless, not even lively, and will not cause interference and damage to mental strength. It's like sitting in an autumn orchard. When you are thirsty or hungry, you can always have replenishment, but you are not afraid of the fruit falling and hitting you on the head. Greet meditated selflessly. The protective layer outside the meditation environment continues to extend, 1/4 circle, half circle, 3/4 circle, 1 circle, 1.5 circles, 2 circles, the lines are smooth, the curvature is uniform, and the inner wall is a smooth spiral. Surrounding his meditation, the environment builds a protective layer, like a perfect conch, nurturing the smooth and flawless pearls within. Until Gretel's mental power reached its limit, and when he opened his eyes, the protective layer constructed by his mental power had already rotated around the core 3 times. When tested again, the surface of the crystal was red to black, and the numbers that popped up on the crystal column were twice as much as before the meditation method was changed. 138. 138. On the top floor of the Mage Tower, Master Dickel looked at the numbers displayed by the tower spirit and raised his eyebrows in surprise. He's so far beyond the advancement level, why hasn't he been upgraded to a 3rd level mage? Thanks to @book friend 201907111049236660 for the reward of 100 starting coins. A new plot is about to start, I'm a little panicked. Book club number 649136249, everyone is welcome to chat together. Please give me monthly votes, recommend votes, book reviews, and ask for all kinds of things. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 203. The numbers displayed on the crystal column in the meditation room. How to put it, it's not very precise. It takes a certain constant value, for example, the mental power to release a level 0 magic is 1, and it goes up step by step. It's actually a rough average. Each level, that is, wizard levels 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, takes the upper and lower limits of mental power estimates, and roughly divides them into parts from 1 to 100, as a guide for wizards to advance. In other words, if the mental power reading is around 33 to 35 on the red level, you can prepare to advance from level 1 to level 2, if it is around 100, you can prepare to advance to level 3. Some magicians with special meditation methods and extremely rich accumulation may be suppressed to around 110 or even 120 before they start to enter a higher level. The number Gretel tested before was 65, which almost means that he has completed the promotion from level 2 to level 3, half of the accumulated progress. Considering that he has only been a level 2 mage for a month or two, this progress is really surprising. But, 138? No signs of progress yet. In addition to Greet's profound accumulation and huge development potential, Master Descartes, looking at the real-time numbers, had to face a practical problem. Gretel-san, for some reason, hit the upgrade barrier at level 2. Plans had to be modified. Master Descartes originally planned to rely on meditation, potions, and retreat learning to at least get Gretel to level 3 and learn a bunch of second-level magic. A third-level mage cannot yet learn the fireball technique, nor can he transform into a humanoid self-propelled turret, but his survivability is at least much higher. In terms of protection, there are mage armor, protect arrow and resist energy for all-round defense. In terms of attack, there are a number of magics such as acid arrow, fire sphere, lightning shield and ice fall, which can be used for strong attack, defense, and counter-attack. In terms of field control, cloud mist, spider web, and create trap are all very useful. If you want to escape, invisibility, second illusion, and mirror image can be used together, as long as you are smarter, can all run away. If that doesn't work, you can equip bull's strength, bear's tenacity, and cat's lightness to go up and fight with others. In short, if you place people around Neva City and give them a little free space to move around, if you can't defeat them, you can at least escape smoothly. But now, it is clear that the spiritual power has passed the upgrade line, but it cannot be upgraded. Master Descartes sighed. Let him learn all the magic at level 0 and level 1 first. From level 2 to level 5, common magic and introductions will be memorized for me. If he doesn't finish learning and memorizing, he's not allowed to leave the Mage Tower. It would take 3.5 months to learn everything, right? I can't believe you haven't advanced in half a year. Gretel just doesn't advance. Why are you so anxious? After upgrading to level 2, the meditation core has not been built yet. When the trainee mage reaches level 1, he uses his mental power to build all the bones. When he upgrades from level 1 to level 2, he naturally has to attach muscles to the bones. A normal male body has about 640 muscles. The number alone is more than 3 times that of bones. The amount of work is huge, and it cannot be completed so quickly. It also needs to be divided into striated muscle, voluntary muscle, smooth muscle, involuntary muscle, and cardiac muscle. It needs to be shaped layer by layer from shallow to deep. Each muscle has to be divided into N bundles, as well as paramecium and tendons, as well as it is necessary to reserve space for blood vessels and nerves. 1 month. Muscle building is not complete. 2 months. Still not finished shaping. 3 months. Training course completed. Gretel learned all level 0 and level 1 magic and successfully passed the examination of Archmage Carlyle. In the core part of meditation, he has finished shaping all the striated muscles and is moving on to the smooth muscles. In the meditation room, the astonishing number 169 popped up on the crystal that tested spiritual power. However, what is the upgrade? It's not on the agenda yet. Although he also wanted to advance quickly, the basics had to be laid, right? 3.5 months. Greet has memorized all the introductions to common magic at levels 2-5. However, he still shows no signs of upgrading. So can I go to a treatment center? I have really finished learning everything I can learn now. Archmage Carlyle looked at Gretel helplessly, wishing he could throw out thousands of books and bury him. However, many years of experience have made him understand, if he did not advance when he first changed the meditation method, it may be because he did not have enough accumulation. If he has not advanced after 3 months, it is probably that he is stuck. What a magician needs when meeting a pass is not hard study, but experience, knowledge, and opportunity. Generally speaking, the Magic Council encourages them to go out, travel, explore, take risks, and even fight. As we walked, some people were injured, lazy, and sunk. Some were killed halfway. There were also many magicians who found their own opportunities and moved to the next level with high spirits. But can this little guy be let out? Ah! Can it be released? Archmage Carlyle inhaled deeply, exhaled deeply, and inhaled deeply again. He finally threw a stack of information in front of Gretel. The magicians supported by the council have to complete some tasks every year. You are now a 4th level arcanist, equivalent to a mid-level mage, and naturally you have to shoulder your responsibilities. Because of last year's war, the Parliament's demand for magic materials has greatly increased, but production has not been able to keep up with demand. Especially for our dwarf friends, the ability to smelt mithril has always been a bottleneck. The Parliament has issued a research and development task for this purpose. Take this information and go take a look tomorrow to see how you can increase the production of mithril. Gretel, wait a minute, I'm a magician and a healer. I don't know how to smelt mithril. I'm a doctor. I major in clinical medicine, not metallurgy or materials. Why did you throw me over to the dwarves? I am not professional enough. You have to go even if you don't understand. When you complete the task, when will you come back? Or, come back after you upgrade to level 3 mage. Archmage Carlyle walked away. Don't know? It's best if you don't understand. If you don't understand, you can upgrade with peace of mind. Is it easy for him to find such a task? A level 2 crispy little mage with a level 4 arcane spell. Exploration missions and combat missions are all afraid of high damage rates. Production tasks, such as copying scrolls and preparing potions, are really overkill. The most suitable one is the research task. However, most of these tasks are set up by each mage tower themselves, find people to do it, and recruit people from outside. Only a few of them are released in a year. The mission location must be in Neva City, so you can watch it right under your nose. You have to give him enough freshness and experience. Even a low-level magician can do it. Gretel. Forget it, you are short-handed when taking advantage of others, and soft-spoken when trying to take advantage of others. I have been enjoying the free training so far. If a task falls through, I might as well go to work. Besides, he hasn't seen a dwarf yet. A new intelligent race. In bulk. Bring the paper, the pen, the X-ray light source, ah no, bring the glorious cult badge that Lin An gave you, and try to seize the opportunity to draw more anatomy diagrams. Thanks to @bookfriend 202105150758175114 for the reward of 5,000 starting coins. Thanks to @littlefot55 for the 100 starting coins. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, please review books. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 204. You carry the load, and I lead the horse. Greed hummed as she walked on the mountain path. He rode the pony summoned by Summon Mount, swaying and swaying among the lush grass. The reason why it is a pony is because we are walking on a mountain road at the moment. He summoned a mount of normal height to come out. Greed was afraid that he would fall. He was carried into the Mage Tower in March, and it was already mid-July when he was released. The meadow in the distance changed from faint green to bright green with golden color. Halfway up the mountainside in the distance, a blue lake reflected the sky, and white clouds floated silently in the center of the lake, making the surrounding area seem quieter and clearer. Bernard carried his big bone club and followed Greed step by step. The bone stick pointed diagonally toward the sky, pulling apart the tassels of long grass, reaching a height even higher than Gretel's head. It's not Gretel who abuses his followers. Really, with his magical strength, even the horses he could summon couldn't carry Bernard. Just, sad. Maybe when he reaches level 5, the phantom pony he summons can hump this barbarian. However, according to the information that Gretel memorized, The phantom pony's carrying weight is the weight of the caster at 10 pounds/caster level. No matter how Gretel looks at it, he doesn't think that Bernard is only 50 pounds heavier than him. He couldn't even lift that big bone alone. The forging area that Greet wants to go to is on the north side of Igor Peak and in the heart of the west foot of Clark Peak. It can be said that if you look down from the top of Igor Peak, you can see the gate of the forging area. If something unusual happens, the mages can activate their flying skills and come down from the peak to rescue, or they can simply come down from the Babel Tower with lightning, which is a matter of minutes. Moreover, except for a few human mages in the forging area, most of them are dwarves, making it difficult for traders to sneak in. Otherwise, Gretel would not have been allowed to move alone and go from Yamashita Station to the forging area on his own. Archmage Carlyle didn't even send anyone to see him off, but just told Gretel to try to prepare earplugs and eye masks before leaving. Otherwise, how are you doing with your sleep technique? Can it work on you? Just by hearing this kind of talk, you know how noisy the forging area can be. In fact, Gretel climbed up about 500 or 600 meters along the stream between Igor Peak and Clark Peak, when he heard the sounds of tinkling, and booming from the front. Almost there? Gretel perked up. He followed the sound and walked forward. Not long after, he saw a group of rickety wooden houses, colorful, blooming like a field of flowers near the mountain stream. As he got closer, the aroma of wine hit his nostrils, and a short, bearded man shouted at the top of his lungs. At $%U0026*. It's over, Dwarvish. He doesn't understand. Greet silently took a picture of her self-language proficiency. He is now a level 2 mage. Language proficiency can last for 20 minutes at a time, and his daily mana can support 10 to 15. How do you spend your days outside of 6 hours? Gretel really didn't expect that his first difficulty in this mission would actually come from the language barrier. He stood at the door of the tavern and looked around. Soon, he saw a normal-looking 2-story building with a double circle of dark blue 6-pointed stars hanging on it. Greet knocked on the door tentatively, and sure enough, a 5th-level mage came to open the door. When he saw Greet, he was immediately delighted and pulled him into the office. Finally, a new person is here. I'm almost annoyed by them. Hey, which part of the work are you responsible for? Maintenance of magic equipment? Inspection of ore ingots? Or reconciliation of accounts? Why are you here now? You're so early. I'm responsible for researching mithril smelting. Gretel awkwardly handed over the certificate. The official document paper specially made by the Magic Council is light yellow and slightly thicker than normal writing paper. There are wisps of light green lines in the paper pages. The other party first placed a flash spell on the back of the official document, which illuminated the translucent watermark in the center of the page. Then he reached out and flicked it, and a magic mark appeared in the lower right corner. After checking every mark, he lowered his head and read the certificate carefully. We hereby dispatch the 4th-level Arcanist and 2nd-level Mage Gretel Nodmark. After reading this, I couldn't help but raise my head and look at the badge on Greet's chest in shock. The 5th-level mage let out a small wow and looked at Gretel like a monster for a while, before continuing to read the council document word for word. Then, his level of enthusiasm jumped up a notch in exponential mode. The council finally sent someone. Great. It's been more than half a year, and the production of mithril has not increased. The dwarves only know how to drink, we can't scold them yet. We can't lower the price of goods when we sell them. You can't raise the price of grain and wine. How can you get them to increase production? The council keeps asking me to find a solution. If the output cannot be increased, my contribution points will be deducted. \U0026% UN #at. He looked at Gretel with extremely eager eyes, as if he saw a savior coming from heaven. Leave it to you. I was promoted to a second-level Arcanist this year. It's so difficult to do research and so on. I can't understand it at all. You are a fourth-level Arcanist, so you will definitely be able to solve the problem. What research conditions do you need? Just tell me, and I will solve it for you immediately if I can. If I can't, write a report and apply to the Magic Council. Gretel really couldn't bear to let him down. To be honest, if what the Magic Council wants is steel making, open hearth steel making, blast furnace steel making, converter steel making, burning coke, blowing oxygen, there is always one suitable for you. Although he knew nothing about it, he could still provide an idea. But smelting mithril? He doesn't even know what mithril is. Can you first let me see how mithril was made? It's a small thing. Just wait for me to make arrangements and I'll take you in right away. The fifth-level mage sat up and put the documents in his hands away. He took out a thin silver headband and handed it to Gretel. This is a headband that stabilizes language proficiency. It has no other purpose than to allow you to understand their words. The mages who work here each have one. It is a loan from the Magic Council. You have to return it when you leave here. The forging area is very dangerous. Can't wander around. The first difficulty was solved like this. Gretel took the ring with gratitude and put it on his head. The headband is a bit big, so I pressed it back to get it stuck above my ears without pressing it on my eyes. The touch on the fingers is still a little greasy. God knows how many people have worn this headband and whether the previous owners have cleaned it. Greet secretly made up his mind to go back and wash it with soap before following the fifth-level mage out of the wooden house and to the front of the tavern. Old Hunter. This is the new mage from the council. Take us into the Mithril district to have a look. The tavern was a noisy mess, with sounds of fistfights, gambling, and wild singing coming out from the doors and windows. The fifth-level mage shouted 3 times before an old dwarf came out drunk, with a red face, and shouted at him. Shout whatever you want. I'm already off work. I want to enter the Mithril district. I'll do it tomorrow. As he spoke, he raised his head and took a swig of beer. Rich foam overflowed from the edge of his beard. The old dwarf wiped a handful of foam with his backhand and spit out thick phlegm. Finally, he still had some courtesy and did not vomit directly at the feet of the mages. Instead, he fell on the steps of the tavern, shiny and gray with black. Greet's eyes narrowed. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, please review books. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 205. Gretel immediately wanted to find a mask and put it on himself. Forge, miner, spit, gray-black thick phlegm. Putting these keywords together, a word immediately popped into Greet's mind. Pneumoconiosis. Pneumoconiosis is a collective name for a group of occupational lung diseases caused by long-term inhalation of production dust of different pathogenicity and retention in the lungs during occupational activities. It is mainly characterized by diffuse fibrosis of lung tissue. Pneumoconiosis alone is not terrible. What is terrible is that pneumoconiosis is often accompanied by a series of complications. Respiratory system infection, pneumothorax, tuberculosis, COPD. If you imagine a person with tuberculosis coughing and spitting in front of you, you must wear a mask decisively. By the way, it seems that the physique of dwarves is much stronger than that of humans. What seems like a minor illness to dwarves can bring down humans anytime and anywhere. I don't want to cross over and die of tuberculosis. I need to wear a mask. It is best to use N95. Sorry, no. Greet tried his best, but only prepared a batch of Woolianda masks, plus bubble technology to cover his head. However, because the other person spat at you, he took out a mask and put it on the spot. Gretel felt that if he did this, he would never be able to enter the forging area. You will be collectively ostracized by the dwarves until death. Greet silently dragged the accompanying mage back 2 steps. Seeing him like this, the old dwarf snorted and murmured a few words in a low voice. The volume was too low, and the language proficient headband didn't work, but Gretel could probably guess from the look on his brows and eyes that he was saying weak chicken, coward, and the like. Greet was not angry at all. If this level of contempt could make him angry, he would have developed tension pneumothorax long ago after more than 10 years in the emergency department. Instead, he squatted down slightly, looked straight at the old dwarf, and earnestly persuaded. Old sir, if you feel your throat is uncomfortable, it's best not to drink. Alcohol increases the burden on the heart and lungs, stimulates the gastrointestinal tract, and damages liver function. Whether it is pneumoconiosis or tuberculosis, or a simple respiratory infection leading to spitting, it is best not to drink alcohol. The old dwarf choked. He instinctively wanted to say something else, but when he saw Gretel's serious and caring look on his face, he swallowed it back. He turned around and returned to the tavern, his beard twitching and muttering something. Greet watched his stocky back disappear into the tavern, toasting and drinking as he walked, and couldn't help but shrugged and smiled slightly. At this time, he used a healing technique on himself, although he didn't know if it could prevent the spread of tuberculosis, but it was better than nothing. The 5th level mage next to him gave him a tug. Hey, you offended him. How? The dwarf hates it most when you don't let him drink. But he's still coughing, so it's really best not to drink. What does that have to do with you? I'm a healer. It doesn't matter if you can't see it. If you see it, you have to remind it. After all, they did not enter the forging area immediately, but first settled in the wooden house outside. After chatting with each other, Greet learned that the name of the 5th level mage was Taylor Dumfries. He was 38 years old, a native of Nevis, and specialized in the School of Change. Because he bombed a laboratory before, he had to sell himself to pay off his debts, and took over the task of stationing here for 2 years. Those dwarves are difficult to deal with. Speaking of his mission, Master Dumfries complained. Everyone is stubborn, and loves to drink. Every day except for work time, they are noisy in the pub. If you want them to work more, they will not listen to anyone unless the old man in the lead speaks. That old man and cunning. Last time I asked them to pay 10 more pounds of mithril, and he blackmailed me for 10 barrels of spirits. 10 barrels. Gretel, not to mention whether this deal is worthwhile or not, wouldn't those dwarves not want to work even more when they are drunk? That's not the case. There are 200 to 300 dwarves in this forging area. 10 barrels of strong liquor are just enough to moisten their throats. By the way, what are you doing? Greet spread out a large thick canvas and was cutting it, then using repair techniques to join it together to make clothes for himself. He came in a hurry. He didn't have time to buy the fire-resistant work clothes in the forging area, so he had to make them himself. Early the next morning, Gretel and Master Dumfries, led by the old dwarf, walked all the way deep into the forging area. The forging area is deep inside the mountain. Passing through 2 steel gates inside and outside, there are forging rooms connected to each other on both sides of the road inside. Wizard Dumfries walked beside Gretel, muttering along the way. Why are you dressed like this? It's so ugly, afraid of getting burned. Don't you have a mage armor? Greet looked at him helplessly. Wizard Dumfries himself had fluttering robes and a 3-piece set of mage armor, energy resistance, and arrow protection. The last spell, Gretel guessed, was mainly to protect against flying iron flowers. All 3 spells are invisible and don't seem to affect his appearance at all. But, you are a 5th level mage, and I am only a 2nd level mage. You don't know this spell, I'll bless it for you. However, Gretel never had the guts to leave his life to others. He and Bernard were exactly the same, both wearing flame-retardant suits made of thick canvas, long sleeves and long trousers, with cuffs tightened. There were no ready-made Velcro fasteners, so Greet specially found a piece of cocklebur, peeled it off and used magic to stick it to the edge of the clothes. Clothes, coats, hats, and shoe covers are all made of thick canvas. Wear a Woolianda mask on your face, put on the air bubble technique outside, and be fully armed before you have the courage to enter the forging area. As for how Master Dumfries muttered and laughed at him, Gretel said that he couldn't care less. The forging area was not a series of furnaces, but flowing fire pools. Gretel took a few steps closer and saw bright red magma gurgling in the pools. A smell of sulfur hit his face, and Gretel secretly thought that he had miscalculated. He should have put on a gas mask to come in. Waste. The iron ingot is not soft yet. Suddenly a loud roar sounded in the room. The entire forging room buzzed, and Gretel was startled and almost took a step back. I saw a dwarf in front of the fire pool with his head lowered, sending the iron ingot that was about to be picked out forward again, and immersed it in the magma again. Gretel looked carefully and saw that the skin of the scolded dwarf was slightly smoother and his beard was not that long, while the face of the scolded dwarf was wrinkled and his beard hung down to his chest even if it was braided. In his hand, he was swinging a hammer the size of a beer glass, clanking, clanging, and sparks flying when he hit it on the anvil. Why don't they shave their beards? Aren't you afraid of burning your beard with this method of smashing? Gretel did not want to comment on the level of labor protection provided by the dwarves. He followed Wizard Dumfries all the way inside. No dwarf took the initiative to say hello, and no dwarf even looked at him. Wanting to invite someone to make an introduction or something, Greet looked around and simply gave up the idea. The further inside, the brighter the color of the magma in the fire pool became. When they reached the last forging room, Gretel was still unable to breathe even though he had the magical effect of cold and heat resistance. This is the place where mithril is smelted. The Wizard of Dumfries told him loudly. No matter how loud they were, the mages couldn't stand the ping ping pong 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 pong, and the sound that rumbled and rumbled. It was simply deafening. Greet craned his neck to look inside, and saw an extremely majestic fire pool in the center of the room, about half a person tall and 5 or 6 meters in diameter. The edge of the pool shone brightly and was inlaid with a row of magic symbols. There are 3 or 4 rows of steps on the edge of the fire pool. A dwarf with a beard that touches the floor is busy alone by the pool. The dwarves next to him were at least 3 meters away from him. This fire pool is also particularly active, with lava and steam spurting up from below. The color is translucent and blazing white, and from time to time there is an explosion. Is this place safe? Can I go in? Gretel hesitated. Before they could decide, a middle-aged dwarf with a white braided beard hanging down to his waist had already walked out of the room, standing in front of them with a swagger. You don't go in. As expected, the traffic volume decreases on working days. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, please review books. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 206. Not allowed in? Greet automatically and consciously shrank his steps. In the early years, they had linked up with nearby large steel companies and visited steel plants. They really followed the guides and did not dare to make mistakes in their steps. After all, when you hear from time to time the molten steel down here is 1650 degrees, this tank weighs about 140 tons and contains 260 tons of molten iron, This pipe was improperly operated once, and the sprayed out killed people. What do you mean by not daring to say one more word or take one more step, brothers? Although this is just a forging area for dwarves, not some top factory, the principle is the same. Although there were 3 or 5 dwarves walking back and forth inside, Greet understood that just because professionals could walk, it didn't mean that non-professionals could also walk. What if something explodes, and magma with a temperature of more than 1,000 degrees and thousands of degrees splashes out with sparks? How can you rely on the mage armor to carry it with you? Greet said that life is his own. He immediately stood still outside the forge. Seeing that Master Dumfries wanted to argue with the dwarf blocking the door, he reached out and tugged at the back of his robe. Wizard Dumfries stepped back angrily, and the braided dwarf raised his head higher and louder. "Wait outside, it'll be over soon." He picked up a hammer, smaller than the one Greet saw outside, with the hammer head only as big as a fist, and knocked hard twice at the door somewhere. At the same time, distant knocking sounds sounded in various forging rooms at the same time. Dang, dang. Dang dang dang. When the first blow was struck, the sound of hammering and shouting in the forging room was still deafening. When the second knock sounded, the forging rooms from the gate to the mithril area fell silent one after another. After the third knock, apart from the rapid footsteps, the only sounds left in the cave were the whistling of the wind and the occasional crackling of the magma bursting. The dwarves walked out of the forge room in groups. They adjusted their robes with black ash-stained palms, dusted off the soot from their leather skirts, and lined up neatly in the central aisle. From the front of the passage near the mithril area to near the gate at the entrance of the mountain wall, they knelt down in rows. Wizard Dumfries quickly pulled Gretel out of the way. The 2 magicians, and Bernard, who followed closely behind, huddled in an inconspicuous recess, watching the dwarves kneeling neatly, praying in unison. "Our great Father God." "Hey, what are they doing? Is it time to pray?" Gretel poked his head out from behind Master Dumfries, then retracted his head, then revealed half of his eyes, and looked around cautiously. The prayers of the dwarves became louder and louder, and finally, someone took a hammer, bang bang bang, bang bang bang, and knocked the ground neatly. "Greet, no wonder there are so many potholes along the way. I hit the ground with a hammer 3 to 5 times a day, and it's impossible to fix it no matter how hard I go." Amidst the sounds of prayers and percussion, the fire pool in the mithril district suddenly burst into flames. The old dwarf who was taking care of the fire pool alone quickly bent down, picked up something from the center of the fire pool, held it with long iron tongs, and ran towards the back with sparks flying. After a moment, the exact same prayer sounded from behind the fire pool. "Our great Father God." The voice was slow, hoarse, and smelled of weakness, but it was sonorous and powerful, like gold and stone. Just listening to it gives me an unspeakable shock that silently grows deep in my heart. Gretel stood quietly, listening to the prayers behind the fire pool, which resonated back and forth with the voices of the dwarves in the passage, getting louder and louder. The prayers reached its peak, and a ball of bright light suddenly exploded from behind the fire pool. Even if the magma rolled and the flames flew, it could not suppress the brightness of the silver light. Gretel couldn't say what he saw. The field of vision was blazing white, and bright lights were flying around like dragons and snakes. In an instant, a series of messages popped into Gretel's mind. Strong light, welding flowers, sunglasses, electro-optical ophthalmia. He closed his eyes subconsciously. The strong light came on and off, repeated several times. After a long time, the prayers finally stopped, and heavy footsteps returned to the forging room one after another. The dwarf with the braided beard at the beginning held up a wooden plate. In the center of the plate, there were 5 small shiny metal strips. "Today's mithril. Take it." The wooden plate was passed forward and almost poked Master Dumfries' thigh. The 5th level mage hurriedly caught the wooden plate, even a little awkwardly, and walked into a small room next to him side by side with the braided dwarf. After weighing, registering, and confirming that everything was signed and stamped by both parties, Master Dumfries put away the metal blocks and carefully sealed them into a copper box. "Look, this is Mithril." Looking at the dwarf's leaving figure, Master Dumfries shrugged helplessly. "Every day I toss and toss, just a small amount, just enough to wear a bracelet. This arm can't be thick." Last year, Master Mendria came back from the battlefield and wanted to repair his radiance staff. It took 30 days. "Take away all the mithril at once, good fellow, it's not enough." Just as he said this, there were chaotic footsteps outside the room again. Master Dumfries immediately pushed open the copper box, stood up, lowered his head, and stood solemnly. "Master Tarbot, thank you for your hard work." No one responded to him. Gretel followed his example and stood solemnly with his head lowered, and quietly looked out. Luckily he lowered his head, otherwise he wouldn't have seen a group of dwarves gathered together, or rather, holding up a particularly old dwarf, slowly walking toward him. "Go outside." The old dwarf has white beard and hair, his arms are weakly placed on the shoulders of the braided dwarf, and his head is lowered. The flickering firelight in the passage shone on the back of his hand, and Gretel saw that the skin on his hand was loose and shriveled, dry and wrapped around the back of his hand, and it looked like there was no muscle underneath. Sweat dripped from the temples and the ends of the beard, and every step along the way was wet. "Hey, that one who made mithril just now, magic, or magic?" "It's probably the magic. Is it so tiring?" The teacher and the bald bishop never seemed so tired when they released their magic. Just as he was thinking this, the old dwarf suddenly raised his head and coughed violently. The coughing sound was thick and heavy, with obvious phlegm sound, and I had difficulty breathing after each cough. Gretel subconsciously walked forward, wanting to ask a few questions or check, when he saw a group of dwarves behind him raising their hammers, staring closely at the old man, and muttering, "Greet, if you have something to say, don't be violent." A white light soon flashed on the hammer. One after another, they brushed against the old man's body. With this support, the old man's breath soon recovered and he was able to shake off the support and walk on his own. Gretel stood at the door of the room and watched him go away. After a long time, he heard Master Dumfries softly say, "This master craftsman is 352 years old. He is the leader of this group of dwarves and a 13th level high-level priest. He is the only one here who can lead the dwarves to use magic to smelt mithril. You want to try to increase the production of mithril, you can go to the pub to meet him later. Want to drink?" Gretel's face suddenly wrinkled into a bitter melon. New additions to the collection are directly discounted. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, please review books. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 207. Chapter 207. Master, the master has fallen. Gretel struggled for a long time, and finally stepped into the tavern with Master Dumfries. Trying to touch porcelain, ah no, trying to meet that dwarf master. He doesn't know how to drink. I didn't know how to drink it in my previous life or this life. There are indeed many senior surgeons who love to drink and are good at drinking, but in this generation, starting from the guy who was snatched away from the hand surgery department and could sew 12 mousetails in one class, no one drinks. Especially him. As the deputy director of emergency surgery, I never know when I will be called back to perform one or even several major surgeries. One drink, some bad luck, just a few lives. But now, those precepts, habits, knowledge and ways of thinking have become his only connection with that period of his previous life. But this time, even if Gretel had zero alcohol intake, he was not afraid. He stepped into the tavern with his secret weapon and his head held high. In your previous life, if you were a senior director, you'd better have subordinates who could drink. If you were a master's and doctoral supervisor, you'd better have students in your current class who could drink. As for Gretel now, he has followers who can drink. Greet didn't know the upper limit of Bernard's drinking. But by visual inspection of the volume, the barbarian's abdominal cavity should have twice the capacity of the dwarf. Therefore, even if Gretel does not know how to drink, he can still raise his voice with confidence. Boss, serve wine. Serve meat. Serve delicious food. Here you go. Find a place to sit. Gretel would find a good place without him having to ask. The tavern was filled with smoke as far as the eye could see. The dwarves present each held a pipe and puffed away the smoke, making the entire tavern look like a fire scene. Greet stood at the door and took a long look, decisively picked a seat by the window, and leaned against the window to breathe heavily. I don't know how many people in this group have stage I and stage 2 pneumoconiosis, I don't know how many people have respiratory diseases, and they still smoke like this. This is asking for death. He stayed close to the window from a distance, watching the dwarf boss slam down a tray in front of him that was wider than his chest. 3 large glasses of beer were bubbling, and 3 big elbows longer than Gretel's forearms and thicker than his thighs supported each other, forming a hill on the plate. Just as Bernard was about to reach out for it, the boss had already picked up a small flask, sprinkled a ring of strong liquor on his elbow, and lit it on fire. With a boom sound, golden red flames burst into flames, and the fragrance overflowed. "This is their signature dish," the Wizard of Dumfries shouted to Gretel in the commotion, "but why do you order 3? Don't worry, he can eat it." Gretel shouted back. The 2 magicians reservedly cut a few slices of the golden crispy skin on the elbow, and slowly tasted it with the mashed potatoes and sauerkraut on the plate. Opposite the large and generous wooden table, Bernard held a big elbow in one hand and a large wooden cup thicker than his head in the other hand, clicking, clicking, tons, 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 and his mouth was full of oil. "Why are you still eating like this? Aren't you free to eat the dozens of pigs, cows, sheep, and cages of rabbits I raise in the animal laboratory? I also left 50 gold coins for you. Could it be that instead of eating them all, you sold them all for wine?" The 2 magicians ate less than half an elbow and drank 2 glasses of wine. Gretel only drank water. Bernard happily swept away the remaining 2½ elbows, 3 large glasses of beer, almost all the side dishes and sausages, burped, and plunged into the battle group in the center of the tavern. "Are you wrestling? I'll come too. Come on, come on." Dwarves, both familiar and unknown, offered their seats to him. In the group of dwarves, those who can drink are friends, those who can drink and eat big elbows must be a good guy, and those like Bernard who can kill 3 times the amount of food in one go must be the brothers of the dwarves. What? Bernard is not a dwarf, but is twice as tall as a dwarf? Dwarf brothers don't talk about that. Bernard sat down on the wooden pillar. The big man, who was more than 2 meters tall, immediately shrank into a ball in a grieved manner. His arms were twice as long as those of the dwarf opposite him. The tavern was quiet for a moment. The boss ran in and ran out again, carrying a 1-foot-thick chopping board and placing it on the table. "Come on, come on. Harder. Harder. Give the big guy some color. Wayne. Haven't you had enough to eat? Work harder." The dwarves roared. Bernard sat arrogantly in the center of the whirlpool, knocking down one and then another. After killing the 3rd one, he raised his head and slammed the table. "I want to drink beer. Give him wine." "I'll pay the bill," shouted the 4th dwarf who sat down. The beer came immediately. Bernard drank it all in one breath and put his elbow on the table again. "Come." The cheers and cheers hit the roof again. Greet took advantage of the fact that no one was paying attention, covered his head with a bubble technique, and walked into the crowd despite the thick second-hand smoke. He got to the edge of the battle group, stood behind Bernard and shouted, Come on. Bernard, come on. If you win this game, I'll give you a leg of lamb. Creak, creak, creak. The 3-inch thick solid wood table groaned in pain. The two warriors' arm muscles bulged, veins were exposed, and they gritted their teeth. Gretel stood nearby and watched intently. Deltoid muscle, biceps brachii, triceps brachii, extensor radialis longus, extensor radialis brevis, external jugular vein, cephalic vein, median forearm vein. Well, it seems that the anatomy of dwarves is not much different from that of humans. He's your friend. Someone suddenly tapped him on the shoulder. Gretel turned around and saw a dwarf with a grey beard climbing onto a bench and standing next to him. Greet smiled and nodded. My follower. Bernard, don't worry. Lean forward. Breathe in time. Press your wrists in. 1, 2, 3. With a bang, the forearm of the dwarf opposite was firmly pressed onto the chopping board. Bernard immediately turned his head. Leg of lamb. A leg of lamb is a leg of lamb. Greed took out 2 gold coins and shouted to the boss to bake them, add more honey and more spices. The dwarves around him also looked at him much closer. You are not bad to have such followers. Hey, stop cowering by the window and come sit here. He pointed. Deep in the bar, on a rammed earth platform half a person's height, the old dwarf master was sitting high during the day, surrounded by a group of middle-aged dwarves, looking down at the commotion below with a smile. Greed wished for it. He moved closer to the earth platform, sat side by side with the grey-bearded dwarf next to him, and talked quietly. While chatting, he raised his ears and listened to the dwarves on the earth platform on the right taking turns to persuade. Master, you'd better rest more. Yes, Master, it's really tiring to activate magic 5 times a day. It's good to have one less time. Master, you've been in poor health recently, so you'd better not work so hard. Master Tarbert has been in poor health. The grey-bearded dwarf suddenly touched him. Gretel turned his head and saw his bronze face, thick eyebrows and big eyes all crowded together, full of worry. Every day after using magic, he has to cough for a long time. He can't sleep all night these days. Hey, I asked your magic council, can you let him rest more and stop pushing him so hard? Don't smoke if you have a cough. Gretel turned to look at the pipe in the old dwarf's hand, and then at the large glass of wine he was holding down. He really felt that fatigue was not the key factor. Before he could answer, the old dwarf lost his temper and smashed the wine glass on the table, causing the wine to splash everywhere. Please advise me, everyone advises me. I can no longer hold the hammer. If you don't let me use magic, I will die. I can still hit the iron happily with Father God. Cough 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 cough. He suddenly leaned over and coughed loudly. The dwarves on the left and right hurriedly came forward, offering support and patting on the back. The sound of the slap was as heavy as hitting a wall. Every sound made Greet tremble with fear. He didn't know whether the phlegm came out first or the spine was broken first. After pounding for a long time, the old dwarf's coughing gradually became sparse, but it didn't seem to be getting any better. Suddenly there was chaos in the crowd, and a panicked shout rang through the air. Oops, the teacher can't breathe. Gretel jumped up. Thank you and wished to return the 1,666 book coins rewarded by Hideo. Thanks to for tipping 100 starting coins. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 208. Gretel was not the only one to jump up. Beside the old dwarf, one on the left and one on the right, 2 younger dwarves jumped up. The 2 people hurriedly put the old man flat on the stool. After thinking that something was wrong, they lifted it up and put it on the ground. Gretel. Stop. Although I don't know why I am short of breath, no matter whether it is pulmonary heart disease, phlegm blocking the trachea, or asthma, people cannot lie down. People with pulmonary heart disease should lean on their backs, and those with phlegm blockage should lie on their backs and pat their backs. In other situations, each person has his or her own appropriate position, and you can't just let people lie on their backs. Pick him up. Lift him up. He shouted as he ran forward. There was chaos all around, no one paid attention to him, no one even looked at him. The old dwarf was lying flat on the ground. The dwarf on the left knelt down to pray. The one on the right was spinning around, shouting, "Where's my hammer? Where's my hammer? Need a hammer now?" Gretel really couldn't complain. However, the dwarf on the left had already raised the hammer and raised it up. A white light emitted from the hammerhead and fell directly on the old dwarf. The effect was immediate, and the old dwarf's painful expression suddenly became calmer. "Oh, the hammer is a magical piece of equipment, okay." Gretel took a quick look and saw that the handle of the hammer was mottled and smoky. It was clearly used for daily blacksmithing. Maybe this is indeed normal for dwarves. Just like a bald bishop carrying a scepter on the battlefield. The dwarf on the right also found his hammer. The two of them knelt, one at the patient's head and the other at his feet, praying at the same time. One after another, white light fell continuously on the old dwarf. At this time, the incident had alarmed the entire tavern. The dwarves who were drinking, fist-fighting, and arm-wrestling all stopped their movements and stood up from their stools. Nearly 100 pairs of eyes were fixed on the platform, waiting for the treatment results and hoping that Elder Talbot would turn the corner. The healing effect of the two dwarf priests was good at first, but within half a minute, it became worse and worse. The time of remission gradually shortened, and the patient's face became increasingly ugly. The two dwarf priests looked at each other with sweat on their heads. One of them spoke up. "Brothers, please help me pray together. Let me see him." Greet interrupted. As soon as he realized something was wrong, he rushed forward. However, he was only a first-level warrior. After switching to a mage, he became even more inactive and his athletic ability was limited. He stepped on the stool, walked around the table, climbed onto the earth platform, and rushed over thousands of mountains and rivers with great difficulty. When he looked down, the old dwarf's face had changed color, and he was wheezing in his throat, making a sound like a bellows. "Oops! This is an airway obstruction." Greet immediately knelt down and stretched out his hand to save him. Nahi's eyes flashed, and a short, steel-like arm stood in front of him, almost pushing him over. "Who are you? Go away. I am a doctor, I am a healer." No response. The dwarf priest kneeling beside the old dwarf still stretched out his arms and glared at him fiercely, not allowing him to come near. Gretel said ouch and suddenly reacted. What I spoke to him was the common language of mankind. He speaks Dwarvish. I relied on language comprehensive's translation to understand. That dwarf. He may not understand what I say. Stupid is crying, stupid is crying. Greet hurriedly chanted attentively, and put a language proficient on the other party. He explained loudly again and threw a healing spell to prove that he was really a priest. The dwarf priest's face softened slightly, and he raised his hand to ask for his help in treatment. Greet couldn't wait to pounce. When he opened the old dwarf's teeth, he saw that his mouth was sticky and filled with phlegm. Sure enough, the sputum is blocking the airway. Damn it, if you don't clear the sputum quickly and open the airway, what's the use of desperately brushing the treatment? This is the bad thing about a world with divine magic. Leave everything to magic. Without magic, you wouldn't know how to cure illnesses, right? Gretel cursed in his heart, his mind racing. If it was in the previous life, he must have inserted a sputum suction tube, connected it to a negative pressure suction device, and started it. It can take as little as 5 seconds and as much as 15 seconds, and it can definitely suck out the phlegm. But now, what about the suction tube? What about negative pressure aspirators? What about the power supply? The patient's face became worse and worse. Gretel did not dare to hesitate anymore, and quickly moved his right hand to dig out the phlegm from the old dwarf's mouth. Pieces of sticky phlegm were dug out, but the old dwarf still did not get better. His body even began to twitch, like a fish out of water, struggling. This is a lack of oxygen. The airway is blocked, the blood oxygen saturation drops, and the body is violently agitated. This is the human body's instinct to make its final struggle for life. Hold him down! Gretel shouted. He lifted the old dwarf's chin with his left hand and tilted his head back, and tried his best to penetrate the patient's mouth with his right hand. Touch your fingers toward the base of the tongue and lingula to stimulate the throat reflex and make the patient cough more violently. There was a lot of phlegm on my fingers, but it was not enough, not enough. The airway is not clear yet. Must suction. The old dwarf's complexion has turned from white to purple, from purple to green, and his agitation has become weaker and weaker. There is not much time left. As long as the human brain is deprived of oxygen for more than 3 minutes, it will cause irreversible damage. And the dwarf's brain can last for several minutes with the support of divine magic. Gretel didn't want to think about it at all, let alone gamble. He was heartbroken, pinched the old dwarf's nose with his left hand, leaned down, and blocked the old dwarf's mouth with his mouth. Take a deep breath. Use the negative pressure formed between the mouth and mouth to help suck out the sputum in the airway and keep the patient's airway clear. The bubble technique on his head shattered silently. The fishy, sticky liquid rushed straight into the mouth. The smell of tobacco, bad breath, and some other damn smell mixed together and hit him all over his face. Greet could hardly breathe. His eyes were sore, and tears immediately flowed down. But you can't relax, let alone leave. He took a hard breath, then another, and finally tilted his head and spat out a mouthful of thick phlegm. Before anyone else could react, Gretel took a deep breath, lowered his head, and repeated the operation again. One bite. One bite. Another bite. Suck away the phlegm. Clear your airway. Race against death. Add hashtag UN%\U0026. \U0026% at UN. There was chaos around him, some people exclaimed, some shouted, and some seemed to yell something at him. Greed turned a deaf ear to them all and focused on rescuing the patients wholeheartedly. I don't know how much phlegm was sucked out. The rebound force from my hand surged upward, and the patient struggled again. Hoo, ho, ho. A weak, but exhausting sound of inhalation came from the old dwarf's decayed body. There was still phlegm in the airway, but it had become smoother. The old dwarf began to breathe fresh air with all his strength, transporting oxygen to every cell through the work of the alveoli. This faint sound of breathing sounded like the sound of nature to Gretel's ears. He let go of his hands and slumped back, falling to the ground, unable to help but smile. Smiling, he turned his head and lay half on the ground, coughing and retching again. Uncontrollable tears flowed all over his face in a short while. A few rough hands helped him up. Someone pushed him on the wooden pillar, someone handed him water, someone handed him a towel. The towel was as rough as canvas. Someone patted his back with the force of driving a pile, and shouted loudly in his ear. Good friends. Good brothers. Thanks to Et Shao for the 588 book coins. Thanks to Et Kutanchari for the 100 starting coins. The collection keeps falling, 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 it keeps falling, up by 3, down by 2, up by 2 more, down by 3 more. Today the increase in the collection has dropped to single digits again. Starting point, you are playing with me. Wow, please comfort, please subscribe, please monthly ticket, please recommend vote, please book review. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 209. Greet coughed and vomited, rinsed his mouth and wiped his face. After struggling for a while, he regained consciousness and quickly rushed back to the old dwarf. On the way, I didn't forget to pick up a spoon and collect sputum, preparing to go back for bacterial culture experiments. The phlegm entered his own mouth. Who knows what germs are in there? Mycobacterium tuberculosis? Streptococcus pneumoniae? Staphylococcus? Or some mycoplasma? Chlamydia? Fungi? Don't let him get infected. Gretel hit a healing spell on himself with his backhand. He was worried when he thought about it, but it was another healing spell. His care for himself ended here. The old dwarf was obviously hypoxic just now. How he is recovering now and whether he needs further treatment will have to be confirmed with his own eyes before he can rest assured. He rushed over and saw that Master Tarbot had been helped up and was sitting on a stool drinking water. Two dwarf priests, one on the left and one on the right, were accompanying the teacher. Seeing Greet running towards him, the priest who had been thrown language comprehension immediately jumped up and made room for him. Hey, thank you so much just now. The old dwarf also stood up slowly while holding onto the table. Greet quickly bent down to help him. Master, let's sit outside. If you can't breathe smoothly, it's best not to sit inside. It's full of smoke. No need, I'm fine like this. The old dwarf slowly smiled. Greet became anxious. Master. Okay, I'll listen to you. The old dwarf patted the back of his hand slowly. Once, twice. The corners of his eyes were slightly curved between his white beard and white hair, and his smile was exactly the same as when their mentor was seriously ill and his disciples begged him for treatment. After patting twice, the old dwarf let go of Gretel, took the hands of the two disciples and walked out. A large group of dwarves rushed around in the tavern, carrying tables, moving chairs, lighting torches, and waiting for the old man to settle down on the hillside outside. The refreshing mountain breeze blew in waves, and the tired face of the old dwarf gradually relaxed. Greet sat down in front of the old dwarf. Observing carefully, the old man's lips and fingernails were no longer bruised, but his breathing was still rapid. The two dwarf priests looked on eagerly, and the one who was thrown language comprehension came closer and asked carefully. Mr. Pastor, is there anything you can do to help the teacher? We have done everything we can. Don't smoke, don't drink, breathe more fresh air, and don't sleep in a place with poor air circulation at night. Gretel looked at them seriously. And take some expectorant medicine regularly to help cough up phlegm. I am not good at medicine. I will write a letter to Elder Wood. You can take the letter to Oak Ridge and ask him for medicine. And oxygen. For respiratory failure secondary to chronic lung disease and respiratory failure caused by interstitial pulmonary fibrosis, although oxygen therapy cannot cure the disease, it can effectively improve patient comfort and oxygenation. Gretel felt around in his pocket and took out his precious little test tube and the potassium permanganate in the test tube. Use the gas inside as a spellcasting material, gather the same type of gas together, and put it in a bubble spell to let people breathe. Who knows this spell or divine spell? The two dwarves looked at each other. They looked at Greet with blank expressions, and Greet looked at them with blank faces, like another scumbag tutoring a scumbag in solving problems. Did I not explain it clearly? Obviously when I explained it to Elder Wood, he understood it quickly. I can give it a try. Elder Talbot coughed a few times and suddenly spoke at the edge of the long table. The two dwarf priests turned around in shock. Teacher. The old dwarf waved his hand. He looked at Gretel seriously. But, how do I know that the magic is used correctly and that the gas gathered here is the one in the tube? Yes, the two dwarf priests nodded. The tube is empty, colorless, and odorless. Even if it takes half a day of effort, how do you know that the magic is used correctly? It's always confusing if you can't see the proof. I have a solution for this. Gretel thought for a while, continued to dig through his pocket, and took out a complete set of alchemy equipment from the space bag. On-site installation, on-site experiments, and on-site collection of a tube of carbon dioxide. Try this. The old dwarf took the test tube and concentrated on using magic to gather the gas in an empty beaker. After casting the spell, Greet lit a candle and poked it into the beaker. The candle flame did not waver, but a plume of black smoke rose up and went out quietly. Yes, that's it, Greet stroked his hands. He dug out the earliest tube of potassium permanganate and carefully heated it to allow the potassium permanganate to decompose into oxygen. When the powder in the bottle turned from purple to gray-black, Greet handed it to the old dwarf and said earnestly, "First release a bubble technique for yourself, put the gas collected this time in the bubble technique and breathe by yourself." The old dwarf was doubtful. But looking at Greet's eager eyes, he still raised his hand and tried the method for himself. Soon, his face turned rosy and he let out a long breath. "How is it? Teacher, how is it?" "Much better." The old man's voice was light. Greet squatted beside him and quickly added, "It's best to inhale this gas every day. When you use a large magic spell and feel very tired and out of breath, or when you keep coughing and can't sleep at night, it's best to inhale it. I can't say it can cure it, but it can help. People feel much more comfortable." The two dwarf priests nodded and almost clicked out the after images, one on the left and one on the right, grabbing Gretel and thanking him 1,000 times. Greet thought for a while. "By the way, it's best not to use the bubble technique. It's too small and will be inhaled in a while, and the subsequent exhaust gas will be harmful to people. It's best to put a tube near the nose, and connect a bellows behind it, one by one. Click to inject the gas. As long as there is a dedicated person to inflate the bellows, the elderly can also inhale the gas when they are tired or asleep." He spread out the pen and paper, brushed and drew a schematic diagram of an oxygen tube and an oxygen pump. After he finished painting he said, "It is best not to use people to pull the bellows, as it is easy to overventilate. Get a mechanical transmission device at the back and push it with water or any force, for example, get a water tank to put water in, push the bellows and pull it. However, I will do this, it's no longer possible." "We can do this," both dwarf priests laughed. "Making this kind of stuff is our specialty." Greet pushed the pen and paper cleanly. "I give you paper and pen, master, please draw." A large group of dwarves started working at the same time, dividing the work and cooperating. Gretel is only responsible for calculating the tidal volume, the speed of each push and pull of the bellows, and the air supply volume. He handed over the data and went straight to bed. Early the next morning, he saw a strange-looking ventilator, or rather, an oxygen supply bellows. At the front is a tight-fitting mask. According to Greet's requirements, two one-way valves were specially made to facilitate the discharge of exhaust gas. There is a rubber tube behind the mask. If the mask is removed, the tube can be fixed directly next to the patient's nostrils. There is a bellows with a spring attached to the back of the pipe, and something like a water wheel is constantly rotating beside it, pulling and pushing the bellows. What drives the water wheel is a wine barrel with a faucet. The wine barrel is filled with clean water, and the water level is always maintained at the highest point to ensure that the flow rate and impact force remain unchanged, and the bellows can pull at a uniform speed. There is a taller and fatter wine barrel poked next to it, connected to the former through a siphon, and there is a dwarf standing next to it, pouring water into the tall wine barrel. This is really a nice thing, at least it's semi-automatic. Gretel's eyes shone and he smiled at the dwarf priest. This, can you make another one for me? I can use it to save other people. He took out his wallet. Before the bag's rope was pulled open, the palm of his hand was already firmly pressed. Why are you giving us money? You are our good brother. If I make something, I can still ask for your money. Wait, I will make it for you tonight. Yeah. The dwarf version of the ventilator is here. In the future, as long as you reach level 5, learn the oxygenation magic, or find a way to get a liquid oxygen tank, you can give people oxygen. Great Hospital, a powerful rescue tool, is available again. Thank you Ed for cooking 2 dumplings, eating one and leaving the other as a reward for being a widow. 111 starting coins. Thank you Ed for getting up today and don't give me 100 starting coins to cheer you up. Yesterday's collection growth was overwhelming, only 10 items were added. It seems that yesterday's chapter title really scared away a lot of new readers. But it doesn't matter, the book review feedback is very enthusiastic, thank you all for your support. Bow. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 210. After successfully rescuing Master Tarbot, Gretel suddenly became invincible in the forging area. Not to mention that there were dwarves nodding and smiling at him when he walked in and out. Gretel wanted to go into the Mithril district to have a look. The braided dwarf who blocked the way yesterday did not hesitate to get out of the way and lead him in. Go this way. Walk close to the wall, be careful, you'd better pick up the shield, forget it, I'll pick it up for you. Greet reached out and picked up an iron shield. He tried harder and harder, but he still couldn't lift it. He wanted to use his strength for the 3rd time, but the dwarf with the braided beard had already snatched it away. With one arm raised, he raised the iron shield above his head. Greet hid behind the shield the whole time, not daring to take a step faster or slower. A half-inch thick rectangular iron shield blocked the outside. It was dark and looked like a copper wall. Well, I have to say, it feels very safe. What? Shield spell? Mage armor? That kind of completely transparent thing will disappear in a blink of an eye after being released, so you won't feel it at all. Greet followed the braided dwarf and saw the original appearance of the mithril mine, the mineral powder after being crushed and washed, and the wrinkled and pitted intermediate product after rolling in the fire pool. As the dwarf with the braided beard walked, he pointed at the products at each stage and babbled to Gretel. Actually, although mithril mines are very troublesome to dig, as long as you find a good mine, you can still produce a lot of ore. Getting ore powder is not bad, but everyone just works hard and swings hammers. If you want to burn it into pieces like this, it's not easy. Without a good enough fire pool, it's impossible to burn anything. We only have this fire pool here that can burn, and there seem to be only 3 fire pools in the entire kingdom. Understand that the difficulty in smelting semi-finished products lies in the combustion temperature. In the future, we can recommend coke, blast furnace, oxygen blowing, and the like to them. Gret nodded to express his understanding and continued to listen. I can't even walk across this best fire pool. Only old Zion here can stand on the edge of the pool. He is the only one with the most poisonous eyes. He knows when to fish for something. Well, so most people can't get over it, and they still need a robotic arm? If you still want to know the flame temperature, should you consider a metal thermometer? But it's actually not that difficult to catch things. If you're lucky, old Zion can catch several pounds a day. But in the end, when it was made into mithril, it was. His eye circles suddenly turned red. The stocky man, about the same height and diameter, squatted down and instantly changed from a square cube to a flat one. Except for high-level magic, nothing can work, only the master can carry it, You magicians keep urging, the master must be stronger, even though he is so tired, he still refuses to stop for a day. That's why the council sent me here. Greed followed him and squatted down. With this squat, the height difference between the two narrowed a lot. He bent down slightly and could look directly into the other person's eyes. The council sent me here just to find other ways to increase production so that the master will not be so tired. Don't worry, I won't rush the master. By the way, when I use magic to make mithril later, can you let me? Can I just watch? Just watch. The braided bearded dwarf took Gretel in a large circle, found a place in the deepest part of the mithril district, and settled him down. Gretel squatted on the ground, with his back against the cave wall, one eye peeked out from behind the iron shield, and continued to watch the smelting of divine magic. Alas, the braided dwarf is already kneeling on the ground and praying. I have to hold up this shield by myself, it's so heavy. Gretel knelt on his knees, crossed his forearms to form a triangle, and supported the shield with all his strength. Not far to the left, the magic on the high platform has begun. A round translucent cover is suspended in the air. At the bottom of the cover, a grey semi-finished product of mithril quietly sinks there, looking harmless to humans and animals. The dwarves continued to pray. Once, twice, 3 times, the sound became louder and louder, and finally, a blazing white light suddenly lit up in the round translucent cover. Gretel. He had quick eyesight and quick hands, so he used his left shoulder to hold the iron shield, and with his right hand he took out a piece of glass that had been coated with ink 10 times and raised it to his eyes. Protected by the glass, the white light seemed much gentler. Greed observed and muttered. Why does it look so much like an arc? Regardless of whether it is an arc or not, in short, it may be in one direction. Although Greed was a clinical medicine professional in his previous life, he had also heard of using electrolysis to smelt metals. At least, he still knew about electrolytic aluminum. As for whether this white light is electricity, Greed took back the glass piece, rummaged through the space bag, and pulled out a long wooden stick with a magnet attached. He held his breath and stretched the wooden stick out of the iron shield, holding it as flat as possible. Half a minute, 1 minute later, the straight right hand began to tremble, and the silk thread tied to the magnet also rippled slightly. Greed. How come the more I live, the more I go back to my previous life? Even if I pull a hook, my hands won't shake. Forget it, it was probably because I was supporting the iron shield with my shoulders. The shield was too heavy and affected the power of my right hand. Gretel thought for a moment, gave up the stick, and used the mage's hand to hold the end of the silk thread that tied the magnet. This really worked. The magnet swayed twice and then became quiet, suspended in the air, motionless. Gretel waited patiently for a while, the prayers started again, and the white light once again shone in the void. And Gretel's magnet suspended in mid-air also started to rotate slightly. The magnet turns. No one was running around holding the magnet, and the large iron shield and other iron objects did not move. The magnet rotated inexplicably, considering the strong magnetic field, considering the electromagnetic reaction, consider that the white light in that magical light shield is a strong current. In the darkness, Greed's eyes became brighter and brighter. Early the next morning, Greed returned to the mage towers on the peak with a thick stack of papers on the electrolysis mithril experiment, and found Archmage Carlyle again. Master, I have several ideas about how to smelt mithril. Carrying the bookmarks he had clipped in advance, he divided the paper into several parts. Each part has text, diagrams, instructions, and a large number of blank forms to be filled out. Master Carlyle opened the pages one by one. The more he looked at them, the more he frowned. Method 1, make mithril ore powder into a thin rod, insert pure table salt together with the graphite rod, heat until the salt melts, and apply electricity. The recipe of the thin rod needs to be tried, the heating temperature needs to be tried, and the current needs to be tried. it may be necessary it should be carried out in a vacuum, and it may be carried out in gas. See the appendix for the gas preparation method. Method 2, fill the graphite crucible with quicklime, bury a steel mesh in the quicklime, and fill the mesh with mithril or powder, increase the temperature and energize the molten salt of quicklime. You need to try the temperature and current. Method 3, press graphite powder and mithril or powder into shape, insert molten salt, and conduct electrolysis at a certain temperature. Master Carlyle's temples were pounding. Finally, he pushed the paper in front of Gretel and crossed his fingers. What about your temperature? What about the current? How do you make the recipe for the thin rod? Do you electrify it in a vacuum or in that, some kind of gas? Do you know the detailed method? Have no idea. Gretel held his head high and confidently said, "It's precisely because I don't know that I have to try. I have ideas and directions now, but I don't have the people or the strength to do experiments. This is not. Come to the Parliament to apply for a project. Thanks to @nail is not sharp for tipping 3,000 starting coins. Thanks to @magical girl Pika Meow for the 1,500 starting coins reward. Thanks to @wise Iwan for the 500 starting coins. Thanks to @Leah for the 200 starting coins." Last night's chapter really scared away a lot of people. Subscriptions plummeted from 682 to 624, I hope it can rebound today. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, please review books.